Salutations, every pup, and welcome to Chapter 27 of The One They Call Broccoli by Texiliaz. As always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 27. Stain versus... who? Summary. Izuku runs frantically through Hosu, trying to find Ida, only to run straight into Stain. With time running out and instincts threatening to boil over, Izuku faces down against the hero killer. Author's notes. Hello everyone! Sorry for the delay. There was an event I wanted to participate in, plus I was Awa's birthday, plus real life keeping me busy, so this got a bit pushed back to the side. But now we're back with another chapter! I'm not that great at writing fights or action scenes, but I did my best. I hope it's okay. Hope you enjoy. Please read the trigger warnings. Trigger warnings. Mentions of blood and injury, panic attacks, dissociation, suppressed memories. Izuku's point of view. Everywhere around him was absolute chaos. Buildings were on fire, Nomus were attacking the city, and people were screaming and running for their lives in a panic. And through it all, Izuku was running in the opposite direction of everyone else, towards the eye of the fight. He wasn't even sure why he was running in that direction, why he didn't even consider turning around and instead helping with the evacuation of the civilians. All he knew was that danger sense was going off like crazy, and instead of listening to the very useful quirk, something else inside of him was telling him no, begging him to hurry right for the danger. While nearing the source of the chaos, he ran on to the other heroes, but he didn't see Ida, and the bad feeling inside of him only grew when he heard Manuel, Ida's mentor, asking other heroes where the blue-haired boy was. Oh, fuck! Izuku quickly realized what was going on, and as fast as he could, he went back to running. It suddenly became very clear that the bad feeling he had wasn't for himself, rather for his classmate. He needed to find Ida, and he needed to find him fast. Izuku, you can't run away on your own. At least take someone with you, Nana cried out from beside him, her form flickering frantically from their combined stress. I can't, Izuku answered, propelling himself up on a nearby dumpster before scanning the side of the building. Everyone is busy and there's no time. Fuck, it might already be too late. Izu, please, Nana pleaded desperately. You can't stop me, he snarled, just as he landed on the rooftop. He didn't even glance back before he took off again, leaping to the other building, and while looking down alleys for any sign of his friend. You can't stop me, he repeated, so if you're gonna talk, then at least try and be useful. There was a small moment of silence before Nana spoke up. Fine, what can we do? Izuku could feel some of the tension leaving his body, and he took a deep breath before speaking up. Help me look around. See if you can find any signs of the hero killer or Ida. As soon as he said that, Nana, Tayagoro, and En appeared and went in different directions, going ahead of him to start looking down the alleys beneath him. Their limit wasn't very far, only about 20 meters before it started to really hurt, but at least it saved them a few seconds. And right now, every second could count. He tried to remember the layout of this part of town, thinking about what back alleys the hero killer would most likely show up in. But there were so many of them. Honestly, the chance of them stumbling upon Stain or Ida, even with the height advantage, would be damn near impossible. Izu! En called out, his normally calm voice laced with panic. Izuku sprinted over to the rooftop the vestige was standing on, his lungs painfully burning. And when he finally reached the edge, which En pointed out, he saw none other than Stain standing over Ida, who laid on the ground, bleeding. Izuku moved before he could even think, one for all coursing through his veins as he threw himself down to punch the hero killer right in his face. Tenya Ida's point of view. Tenya regretted a lot of things. He regretted that time he was 7 and had walked into the kitchen with dirty shoes, only to blame his brother. He regretted that time he wrongly scolded Midoriya during the entrance exam. He regretted having been so distant to his parents lately. He regretted not giving his mother a hug before he went to his internship. But never before had he felt as much regret as he did right now, as he realized all of those regrets had built up for this single moment, and there was nothing he could ever do to correct any of them. His whole body was paralyzed except for his mouth and eyes. Meanwhile, Native, who Tenya hadn't even tried to save, laid unconscious behind him. He saw Stain approach, before he stood directly over him and raised his sword. But just as Stain was going to go for the kill, just as Ida was sure he was gonna die, a flash of green lightning fell from the sky and propelled itself right at Stain, causing the villain to fly further into the alley. It took a moment for Tenya's eyes to adjust to the sudden brightness, but when he did, once he saw just who the green lightning was surrounding, his eyes widened with disbelief, and he choked on thin air. Midoriya? Tenya cried out in alarm, but the boy ignored him, keeping all of his attention on the villain. There was a rumbling sound coming from his classmate that sounded awfully close to a growl, and when Tenya got a glimpse of the smaller boy's expression, his blood turned into ice. Because that was not a face that belonged to his kind-hearted and timid classmate. And yet, it was one he had seen before. Back at the USJ, and before the villains attacked, Midoriya had worn a similar expression, his lips drawn back into a snarl, eyes practically glowing with rage as he let out an almost animalistic growl that had all of their class locked up in fear. And right now, he wore that exact same expression. Right now, his classmate looked feral. Midoriya? Tenya asked again, but all he got was another low growl, like the boy was somehow too riled up for words. But despite his classmate's state, Tenya could see Midoriya fumbling with his phone, his hand twitching and trembling as he turned it on and unlocked it behind his back, without even a single glance towards it. Is he trying to call for backup? He can't plan on actually trying to fight Stain, can he? That would be suicide! It wasn't that he believed his classmate to be weak, but Midoriya's quirk literally destroys his body. One attack and it would be over. He couldn't let him risk his life for him. Midoriya, get out of here! Tenya cried, getting even more desperate as he saw Stain get up to his feet, a bruise already forming on his cheek. No! I'll save you! Midoriya gritted out through gritted teeth. His classmate then stumbled, as if pushed, and his green eyes widened, gaining some clarity before his head snapped towards the unconscious native hero a few feet away from him. Fuck. Okay, I'll save both of them, he growled, sounding annoyed but no less determined. What? No, Midoriya, you need to leave. This is my fight. This has nothing to do with you. Can you all please shut up? Midoriya snapped, stumbling a bit to the side, as if he was about to lose his balance before righting himself. I don't care if you want me to leave. I am not leaving until everyone gets out of here safely, and that is final. Just as he said that, his phone woke up to life, and once again, without even looking, the boy sent out his location to everyone? So, sure enough, Tenya's own phone vibrated in his pocket. Was it selfish that Tenya felt a small sliver of hope? Stain nearly raised an eyebrow at Midoriya. Oh, and why would you do that? It seems like your friend here doesn't want you to intervene, so why don't you just run along, little hero? Why? Midoriya asked, as if the question was ridiculous. Because that is what it means to be a hero. We're supposed to intervene. Otherwise, what's the point of being a hero? There was a moment of silence where they just stared at each other, before Stain suddenly threw his head back with a laugh. The sound was so loud and so out of character compared to the villain Tenya had just faced down that it left him both confused and terrified. What's so funny? Midoriya said, his voice wobbling a little as he pocketed his phone and took on a fighting stance. I have decided, Stain said with a smile that was way too wide to look natural as he pointed his sword towards Midoriya, that you are indeed worth keeping alive. To be completely honest, I wasn't sure what to think of you after my meeting with them, he snarled, spitting out the word them as if it was a curse. But after actually meeting you and hearing you say that, yes, you are a true hero, aren't you? The villain chuckled. Ida shuddered, and he glanced over at Midoriya to see him glare at the villain, a confused frown on his face as he tried to make sense of what he meant. But before anyone could ask who them was, Stain continued. Therefore, I will spare you, but those two, he said, now instead pointing his sword towards Tenya and Native. Those fakes still need to die. So, if you get in my way, then I will be forced to fight you. And I should warn you that you don't stand a chance. Now, what will it be, little hero? I think you already know the answer, Midoriya growled as he moved his body lower, looking ready for a fight. And despite Tenya's insistent and desperate cries for his friend to leave, to not fight and risk his life, Midoriya charged at the villain. A fight broke out, and Midoriya was moving in ways that Tenya had never seen him move before, bouncing off the ground and walls with green lightning coating his limbs. For a while, his classmates seemed to be able to carry the fight. It looked like they might even be able to get through this. But then, Stain got too close, and all Tenya could do was watch uselessly from the ground as Stain swung his sword at his classmate. The cold steel inches from cutting into his side, and then Midoriya disappeared? Tenya blinked in bewildered disbelief as the boy seemingly vanished in a cloud of smoke, some of his gear falling to the ground with a clatter that echoed through the alley. All at once, Tenya's mind was filled with all kinds of worst-case scenarios. What happened? Was there another villain? Is Midoriya hurt? Oh no, is he dead? But then all his thoughts came to a screeching halt as something small rushed out from the smoke and dashed around Stain. For a moment, the dog? No, wait, a cat? Almost seemed to glow a bright green, and when it turned to snarl at Stain, Tenya could see familiar green eyes glare at the villain with a laser focus. It didn't take much to put two and two together, and Tenya gasped. Midoriya, what are you doing? Run! You are in no shape to fight! He begged his classmate to leave, now even more desperate than before. Did Midoriya not notice he had been hit with a quirk? How could he not notice his whole body transforming into something so vastly different? Stain had come to an abrupt stop and was staring down at the cat, surprise clear on his masked face. But why would he be surprised? Wasn't this the cause of another villain? Before Stain could even make a single move, Midoriya leaped towards the villain, transformed back into a human, and punched the villain in the face. Hard. And now there stood his classmate, barefoot and gloveless but seemingly uncaring of the asphalt beneath his feet as he growled at Stain, the sound low and threatening like a feral animal. Just what in the world was going on? Izuku's point of view. God damn it, fuck, shit! Izuku swore up a storm inside of his head when Stain's blade managed to graze him and he fell down to the floor, utterly paralyzed. For a while, the fight had seemed to be going in Izuku's favor. He didn't think he would be able to win, but he thought that he at least would be able to stall for more time. He hadn't even cared about showing his other form, too focused on survival to think twice before changing, and he had felt almost proud as he managed to dodge all incoming attacks and fight back. But in the end, he wasn't enough. No, in the end, all it took was one small misstep, which led to Stain's sword grazing against his arm and licking the blood off the blade, which, gross, by the way. And then Izuku was down. He tried to fight against the paralysis, the vestiges trying to help him pull against the invisible restraints. All of them were desperate as Stain walked towards Ida, his sword raised into the air. Izuku suddenly felt the asphalt drag against his open palm, and his eyes traveled towards it, only to see Nana's hand covering his own and being able to move it. Desperate hope filled Izuku's very being, and he looked Nana and Diaguro in the eyes and whispered urgently, "Throw me." "What?" Nana asked, looking horrified, as she stared between Izuku and the villain, who was almost right next to Ida, his sword looking ready to strike. "Throw me, please," Izuku repeated, desperate as he looked between them pleadingly. Nana still looked unsure, but Diaguro gave a firm nod before he suddenly, and with way too much force, in Izuku's opinion, chucked Izuku at the back of the unsuspected villain. Izuku's breath was knocked out of him, and he landed next to Ito with a thump. But that was nothing compared to Stain, who fell straight into the wall next to them with a crack. The villain leaned back, blood running down his forehead, and furious eyes glaring down at them, but Izuku just glared back. "How did you?" Stain hissed out, but was suddenly interrupted as a wall of flame separated them. As the searing hot flames erupted in front of them, Izuku couldn't help but smile and let out a sigh of relief. Todoroki had shown up. Through the flames, Nana and Diaguro appeared, and they immediately crouched down next to him to check if he was okay. "I'm fine. We're gonna be alright," Izuku said as the flames died down and he met the eyes of his classmate. He was still not sure they would be able to defeat Stain, but at least now they had one more on their side, and it was looking like they at least would be able to survive. Ida didn't seem to share the same relief as him, though, but Izuku ignored him in favor of telling Todoroki what little information he had on Stain's quirk. "Todoroki, huh? Endeavor's son," Stain said, with obvious distaste in his voice. "No doubt one of the fakes." "No doubt another one of the fakes!" he scoffed, and Izuku felt offended for his classmate. Stain didn't even know Todoroki, so who the hell was he to decide if he was a fake or not? For fuck's sake, the teen hadn't even said anything yet, and he was already being judged as unworthy. Todoroki held his own and managed to keep Stain away from all of them, and luckily the vestiges didn't have to throw Izuku as a weapon again because the quirk eventually wore off and he got back into the fight immediately to help his classmate. For some reason, Ida was still paralyzed, though, and it took a while for them to realize it had to do with their blood types, which Stain even kindly, or stupidly, confirmed was the case. The whole fight was a blurry mess of fear, rage, and adrenaline after that. Which was a shame because he was pretty sure Todoroki gave a pretty inspiring speech somewhere in the middle of it. But Izuku was too focused on not dying to listen. And then, after only a few minor scratches, they managed to do what Izuku didn't think they would. They defeated Stain. Out of breath and slightly limping from one of the deeper cuts in his leg, Izuku helped Ida and Todoroki tie Stain up. They worked in relative silence, making sure the villain was tied up properly and that they didn't miss to remove any of the insane amount of knives. The whole time, Izuku could feel Ida glancing at him. Not that Izuku blamed him, considering he had seen that during the fight. Fuck, he really hoped his classmate would keep quiet about that. "Okay, I think that's the last of them," Izuku said, giving the unconscious and tied-up villain another once-over before nodding to himself and standing back up. "Let's go and find another hero for help." "Midoriya," Todoroki said, causing Izuku to stop and look at him. "I was wondering, why don't you have any shoes?" he asked, tilting his head down to his indeed very bare and bleeding feet. His face paled, and he wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry as he realized he had been fighting the infamous hero killer while barefoot, and without even noticing. Sure, he had noticed the lack of his capture weapon gloves since, well, they were weapons, but there had been no time to put them back on, and there had certainly not been any time to think about his shoes. With a silent curse, Izuku dashed back further into the alley and found his hero costume equipment laying innocently on the ground next to a dumpster. He sighed in relief when he picked them up and noticed they were undamaged. As quickly as he could, he put everything back on, wincing a bit as he pulled on his shoes and felt the cuts beneath his feet drag against the material. Once done with that, he turned back to see his classmates staring at him, Ida wearing a confused frown and Todoroki looking as blank-faced as always, with a worried tint to it. He gave them his best smile and ran back over to them, ignoring the pain that came with every step. "Thanks. I had completely forgotten about dropping them earlier. Now, let's go. Should I carry someone?" he asked, desperate to get out of there and put all of this behind them. Ida was currently dragging Stain with his good arm, while Todoroki was carrying the still unconscious native hero, but for some reason, neither let him help in carrying the load and just shook their head at the offer. "You're limping. It's fine," Ida said, his voice oddly blank before he started heading towards the exit. "You have a bleeding arm," Izuku countered, but frowned as he was only met with silence. Was Ida mad at him? Or maybe he was just stressed? "He probably just wants to feel helpful. Let's give him some space, alright?" Nana suggested gently, and Izuku absent-mindedly nodded his head as he followed his classmates. Turns out, finding heroes was much easier than they had feared, because almost as soon as they stepped foot outside of the alley, they were met with a group of heroes running in their direction. And amongst them were Gran Torino. "Gran Torino!" Izuku said, only to cut himself off as the man tried to kick him in the face and he had to quickly move out of the way to dodge the attack. He heard one of the other heroes gasp and scold the older hero for trying to attack an injured minor, but Izuku quickly waved off their concern and explained that he was his mentor. Izuku swore he could hear someone mutter something like, That hardly makes it any better, but he ignored them and instead waved a hand towards the unconscious hero killer behind them. So, could someone call the police? We kind of need help with what to do with this guy, he said with a sheepish smile. Inside his mind, he heard a couple of the vestiges snort and he rolled his eyes. He was way too tired to explain anything right now, and he just wanted to go home. It was honestly kind of amusing to see the heroes freak out of the defeated hero killer Stain lying by their feet. Even more amusing once Todoroki gave a quick summary of what happened, and all the heroes, Gran Torino included, lost their mind over 3 high schoolers defeating the villain all by themselves. Izuku even got the pleasure of seeing a gobsmacked Endeavor arrive in the middle of the explanation. They were just about to hand over Stain to the heroes when danger sense suddenly spiked up and Izuku's head was hit with a searing pain. And before anyone could even react, a Nomu swept down from nowhere, swooped Izuku up with its talons, and flew away into the cold night sky. Izuku's heart leapt up into his throat, and panic rushed over him as he fought against the claws that were painfully digging into his sides. But he might as well have been trying to bend steel because it just wasn't letting go. He looked up at the monster, trying to find some weakness or anything he could use to break it against it to break loose. And that's when he saw its wings. He got a glimpse into those dead-looking eyes, and he just froze. As if pulled down under a wave in the storming ocean, his mind quickly filled with static as something tugged at the edges of his mind. It felt like his brain was fighting against itself, trying to push something away and out of his grasp. He wasn't sure what he was seeing, shapes and colors blending together, forming an incomplete picture as the feeling of wrong plagued him and numbed his whole body. Someone pulled him out of the Nomu's grip, and Izuku managed to get back to himself just in time to see Stain pull his dagger out of the Nomu's skull with a sickening squelch. Izuku flinched back and tugged at his hair as he shook his head, trying to tone out the familiar sound, while shapes and lights again started flooding his mind. What was happening? Where was he? He needed to get a grip. He needed to... He wasn't sure what happened after that, only that his body suddenly once again had gone numb, and all he could do was stare at the now dead monster, Kid, by his side, his mind once again filled with static. He wasn't even aware of Stain's speech, or how the villain turned unconscious, or how the paramedics arrived. By the time Izuku got back to himself, he was sitting by the open ambulance, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, and unknown people looking over his injuries. He flinched back and curled into himself, unsure where or when he was, or who any of these people were. But then he heard Nana's voice next to his ear, telling him it was all right and that he was safe and that he felt some of the tension leave his exhausted body. Izuku muttered out a small apology to the paramedic and glanced around, taking note of Ida and Todoroki sitting next to him and Gran Torino talking to some officers. As soon as Gran noticed he was awake, the man excused himself and walked over to the ambulance. Izuku hunched into himself, fully expecting a scolding, and was surprised when he felt a gloved hand ruffle his hair. "You back with us, kid?" Gran Torino asked gruffly. All Izuku could do was stare at him dumbly and give him a small nod. "Good. Don't do that again. I'm too old to deal with self-sacrificing heroes again," the man huffed sternly. Before Izuku could answer, the paramedic stood back and looked between them. "All right, I think that's all we can do for now. Let's get you 3 over to the hospital, shall we?" Izuku reeled back at the mention of a hospital, and he shook his head. No, that's okay. I'm fine, really," he said, and tried to stand up, only for a firm hand to land on his shoulder and hold him down again. He looked at Gran Torino with a betrayed look. "You need to get healed, kid. I'm not letting you pull a Toshi here," the older hero said sternly. Ida and Todoroki had already gotten into the ambulance and were watching them, and Izuku could feel himself starting to panic even more because he was seriously at his quirk's limit and there was no way he could make it through the night at the hospital without blowing his cover. "I'm fine," Izuku repeated. "Really, I didn't even break anything this time, so I don't need a hospital," he said, trying to shake off Gran Torino. But his mentor just held his shoulder tighter and shot him a glare, before turning to the paramedics with a raised eyebrow as if to say, "You see what I have to deal with?" The paramedics, for some reason, were giving him horrified looks at the mention of him not breaking anything this time, and were quick to grab him and force him into the ambulance with his friends. Not wanting to hurt anyone, Izuku didn't even try to fight back, but he did shoot his mentor a betrayed look over his shoulder. Gran Torino just grinned at him, though, and gave him a wave. Sorry, kiddo. Oh. Sorry, kiddo. It's for your own good. I'll see you tomorrow as soon as they allow visitors. And remember, don't be a Toshi! And with that, the doors to the ambulance closed, and they were on their way. They sat in awkward silence for a while before Todoroki cleared his throat and asked him what being a Toshi meant. Izuku just groaned and buried his face in his bandaged hands, refusing to answer. Thankfully, no one tried to talk with him after that, and they rode the rest of the ambulance trip in silence. Which was good, because the more time passed, the more Izuku realized how utterly screwed he was. His quirk scratched painfully against his insides, and every bump and turn of the ambulance had Izuku flinch and hiss through his teeth, and he could practically feel Ida's and Todoroki's worried stares from beside him. Hopefully, he would get his own room so he would be able to change form. They arrived at the hospital, and, of course, there was no such luck as privacy whatsoever. Because of the attacks all around the city, the hospital was very overcrowded with patients, and Izuku guessed he should count himself lucky that he only had to share a room with his two classmates. He guessed being UA hero students had its benefits. But again, he was sharing a room with two of his classmates! And he was seriously way over his limit, and he was going to be forced to change form soon. He tried to hold out, and he actually managed to make it through the examinations with just some flinches that the doctors chalked up being from his injuries. Izuku didn't correct them, even though the truth was that he could barely feel the damage from the fight anymore. Could barely feel anything at all, besides the pulsating pain and itching of his skin as his body felt so utterly wrong and stretched to its limit. That's why, when the doctors were gone and he was alone with his two classmates, Izuku came to a decision that he hoped he wouldn't regret. Izuku cleared his throat, gaining the other's attention. There's, something I need to tell you, and it's really important that you don't tell anyone about this, he said quietly, frowning down at the floor. He was so scared of telling them this, but what other choice did he have? Other than breaking out of the hospital, of course. But he had a feeling the vestiges wouldn't let him do that. What is it? Todoroki asked, and Izuku chanced to glance up to see their expressions. Todoroki was looking as blank-faced as ever, though maybe also a little worried. And Izuku gulped nervously. Ida was frowning at him. Izuku wondered if perhaps he already knew what this was about. He had seen his other form during the fight, after all. Finally, Ida spoke, his voice quiet and slow, as if he was choosing his words carefully. After what you did for me tonight, there is nothing I wouldn't help you with. You can tell me anything. Taking a deep breath, Izuku steeled himself. He felt the ghostly sensation of a hand resting on his shoulder, and he focused on that comforting touch. Okay, he sighed. So, you know what my quirk is, right? He asked, thinking it was probably best to start with that and see what they knew so far. It's a power stalking, right? Todoroki asked, Ida nodding along. Yes, so basically it stocks up energy and lets me use it in different ways, but there's another thing, one I don't like people to know about. He trailed off, hands clenched into the comforter beside him. Midoriya, it's okay. You don't have to tell us if you don't want to. Ida tried to reassure him, but Izuku quickly shook his head. No, I need to tell you. It's just hard. I've never had to, tell anyone before. He took another shaking breath, begging his anxiety to calm down. So, well, basically, when my energy gets too low, I turn smaller. Like, I have another form, and if I don't change into it when my energy is drained, then it hurts a lot. Between the panic, Izuku couldn't help but feel a bit proud of that explanation. Even though he knew One for All and his cat quirk are two different powers, it was an easy way to explain them as one of the same. I see. Is it hurting you right now?" Ida asked carefully. "Kind of," Izuku answered, suppressing a flinch as another wave of pain washed over him. Todoroki just blinked at him and tilted his head, looking confused. "Then why aren't you changing into it?" Izuku felt his cheeks redden in embarrassment, and his gaze fell back down to the floor. "Because, well, it's embarrassing," he muttered. "And I'm being serious when I say you can't tell anyone, not even Aizawa-sensei." "Especially not Aizawa-sensei," his mind supplies. Though he didn't say that. "Shouldn't the teachers be aware of something like that?" Ida asked once again. Izuku shook his head in a firm no. "Only the principal know, and a handful of others know about it. I don't trust this with just anyone." The words fell like ash in his mouth. He trusted his dads with his life, both as Izuku and as Broccoli. Just not with this. Never with this. Ida looked ready to argue, but Todoroki nodded in almost understanding and cut him off. "Midoriya, we promise not to judge you or tell anyone. So please, if you're in pain, don't let us stop you," the dual-teared teen said, voice more sincere than he had ever heard before. Izuku glanced between them, taking in their worried but sincere expressions as he fiddled with the comforter. At the next painful wave, he made up his mind and gave them both a firm nod. Okay, just one more thing. If someone comes in here and asks about my other form, then just say I'm working," he said, feeling a blush creeping back up on his cheeks. "Working?" Well, I technically don't have a license yet, but just say I'm an support animal," he answered sheepishly with an embarrassed chuckle. That gained him a raised eyebrow, and he lowered his gaze in embarrassment. Before he could hesitate any longer, Izuku let himself change forms, and in a puff of smoke, where Izuku had just been seated, a fluffy green kitten sat curled up instead. Immediately after changing, he felt all the pain dissipate from his body, and he felt like he could cry in relief. But he couldn't relax just yet, because he knew he wasn't alone. Green eyes forced themselves to blink open, and he looked up at his now towering classmates. Both of them were staring at him, their eyes wide. Ida's jaw even dropped. Broccoli felt awkward under their gazes, and he shifted in place, his ears falling flat against his head as he hunched further into himself and curled his tail around his body. Todoroki was the first to shake off his shock, and his face quickly melted into one of mild surprise. "Oh," was all he said, looking the cat up and down. Ida shook his head and moved to correct his glasses, opening and closing his mouth like a fish as he tried to find the right words to say. I apologize for staring," Ida said, before clearing his throat. I, I just wasn't expecting this. I mean, I did see something during the fight with Stain, but I just assumed. Anyway, you said this was a regular occurrence?" Broccoli nodded, feeling uncomfortable at the other's clear shock. "So, does it still hurt?" Ida asked carefully, looking painfully awkward. Broccoli shook his head. He was feeling fine now. "Can you speak?" Another shake of his head. "I see." They were quiet for a while, none of them knowing what to say. The air was so tense it felt like you could claw through it. Broccoli kept shifting in place. His whole body and every instinct inside of him were telling him to run away or to hide. But he knew he couldn't do that. Knew logically that these two were safe. But tell that to his instincts. After another moment of painful silence, Todoroki spoke up, though his question wasn't one that Broccoli had expected. "Can I pet you?" "Todoroki!" Ida hissed, sounding bewildered that he would even think of asking their classmate something like that. Todoroki, however, looked completely unaffected and simply looked at Ida questioningly. "What? His fur looks soft," he said matter-of-factly, like that was enough of an excuse. Broccoli chuckled internally and felt himself finally starting to relax around the two teens bickering. While the two were busy going back and forth on the ethics of asking someone if they could pet them out of the blue, Broccoli jumped off his bed and landed on Todoroki's. The mattress barely dipped under his weight, and he slowly walked over to bump the other boy's side, gaining his attention. Both of his classmates immediately got quiet and turned to look at him. Once he was sure he had their attention, Broccoli nodded his head firmly before laying down next to Todoroki's warm side, trusting his friend enough not to hurt him. The other seemed to hesitate before another small moment before Brock The other seemed to hesitate for another small moment before Broccoli felt a hand carefully place itself on his back, petting him hesitantly. Broccoli immediately let out a purr and relaxed against Todoroki's thigh, a warmth from his left side feeling heavenly. At the sound of his purring, the touch turned more confident, and soon enough, Todoroki was petting him properly, a warm hand stroking his back and fingers scratching behind his ears, making Broccoli practically melt against him. It was like all the exhaustion from the day suddenly caught up to him, and for the first time, Broccoli fell asleep next to someone that wasn't his family, all while feeling completely safe and content. Shoto Todoroki's point of view. Shoto could feel the moment that Midoriya fell asleep against him, the small cat having gone practically boneless with a sigh. And now he was sitting there, on his bed, with the purring and sleeping cat next to him. And he had absolutely no idea what he should do. Should he keep petting him? Leave him alone? Move him? He had no idea. It wasn't like his father ever allowed him to have pets in the house. That's why Shoto liked petting the stray cats on the way to and from school whenever he got the chance. But he'd never had a cat fall asleep on him before. "He's asleep," he told Ida softly, not tearing his eyes away from the small creature by his side. Midoriya was just so small like this. The tiniest cat Shoto had ever seen. It was adorable. Ida had gone quiet the moment that Midoriya went to lay down next to Shoto. When the other still wasn't saying anything, Shoto glanced over to his classmate, who was staring at Midoriya much like Shoto himself had done. Noticing his staring, Ida quickly cleared his throat. "Midoriya did say he changed into this form when he lacked energy, so he must have been really exhausted," Ida said thoughtfully. "Should I move him?" Shoto asked carefully. The other looked deep in thought, his brows furrowing. "I am not sure. I have only had dogs before, but I think there is some universal rule to not move an animal if they have fallen asleep on you." Ida's eyes then widened as he started waving his non-bandaged hand in front of him. "Not that I am implying that Midoriya is an animal! I was simply—" "It's okay, I understand." Shoto cut him off, feeling the corner of his mouth tug up in amusement. Although what they had gone through had been rather traumatic, Shoto couldn't help but feel thankful for being here with them right now. He was happy they all made it out of there alive, and he felt proud and grateful that Midoriya trusted him enough to show them this side of himself. He wondered if they were friends now. Shoto certainly hoped so. He had no idea how any of this worked, but he certainly saw these two as his friends. Shoto looked at the time and sighed. It was late, after 2 a.m. "We should probably try to sleep," he said quietly, earning a yelp from Ida as he seemed to realize the time and then quickly agreed with Shoto. After some careful maneuvering, he managed to lay down without disturbing Midoriya. His sleeping classmate didn't even stir and just kept purring and cuddled closer to his left side. He must have been really exhausted. "Good night, Todoroki, Midoriya," Ida said from his own bed. "Good night," Shoto answered as he closed his eyes. He fell asleep to the sound of loud purring and the feeling of something warm and soft curled up next to him. And for the first time in probably forever, Shoto slept through the night feeling completely content and safe. Author's notes. Stain facing a small fluffy kitten. "What the shit? I can't fight this!" Broccoli proceeds to beat the shit out of him, all the while still looking absolutely adorable. Even though there won't be any romantic ships in this story, I still love writing about platonic cuddles and fluffy moments, so be prepared for a lot more of that between Izu and other characters. Important note! I'm really sorry that updates are taking a while. I work a 9-hour work for 5 days a week and have 5 stories in the making that I'm trying to put equal amount of time into, so please be understanding if a new chapter isn't coming out in a while. I get asked a lot if I have dropped a fic, and while I'm glad so many enjoyed the story, it is honestly a bit discouraging to be reminded about how long time it takes between chapters. Trust me, I'm not happy with it either. But I need to prioritize real life, and although the writing has slowed down, I have no plans on ever dropping any of my fics. If I, for some reason, have to either drop any fic or put it on hiatus, then I will let you all know. So until then, just assume the next chapter is on the way, and that I'm working as fast as I can. Please. Nothing is getting dropped. With that said, thank you everyone for your continued patience, comments, and support. I love reading all of your comments, especially the theories running around. Hope you all have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world. Next time, we'll get some stain aftermath and visitors at the hospital. Hope you look forward to it. And that's a wrap on chapter 27 of The One They Call Broccoli. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Sorry for some mistakes. I'm moving my phone to a different plan, so I'm having to pause to take care of that, and then I've forget where I am. So sorry if I ever repeat a line or miss a voice on a line. Um, this chapter was a lot of fun, and now we have two more people knowing about broccoli. So Ida and Todoroki, and that's exciting. I I really liked this story. I really liked this chapter, and I'm excited for next chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed this as well. Please go show the original author Texiliaz some love. Please leave me a comment. I love reading your comments. And I was serious about those hate comments last time. It's not illegal. I read your comment. It's not illegal. Leave me a hate comment. I dare you. Uh, sorry, I'm being funny, and I'm failing at it miserably. Anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed this a lot, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye, pups!